The Pantheon presents What Came Out? The Origins of the Fastbreakers, written and read by the author, Andrew Stewart Bergerson, based on real events. Sanchx and the Quiet Pond. A con is like a fast-moving shell game. As Sanchx often said, success depends upon getting your marks to pay attention to the wrong things. Make false assumptions about what is where and why and how and who, until they cannot tell fact from fiction, until they give you, on their own, the very thing you're trying to steal from them. In other words, this tale comes with a caveat. Its protagonist could be Sanchx, Sancho, or Pridbor, a they or a he, you or me. So keep close tabs on the fast-moving shells. There's a treasure hidden there. Sancho had been running all afternoon. His legs were so busy gyrating that he nearly overlooked it. Thorny bushes and tangled vines covered the large boulder. But there it was alongside the big stone. A little trail. More of a crawl space, actually. The thorns ripped Pridbor's silken shirt, though the cart-sized rock did the most to hide his escape. On its far side, the tight passage opened up again, running down an alleyway of trees alongside a pleasant hillside. It was as much the momentum of his limbs as his fear of being followed that drove Sancho downhill. His panic began to release its hold on his legs as the sun struck his face. His pace slowed to a jog. Turning a corner in the vast wood, his eyes caught sight of deep purple dots. Wild blueberries lined one side of the alleyway like untended stalls in a market. From hand to mouth, the berries were devoured, handfuls at a time, gobbling like a bird after a long season of caves. There were so many there for anyone to steal that his handiwork did not slow the pace of his descent. Still, his eyes kept a lookout for anyone who might catch his fingers in the act. If his legs slowed to walking, for they started complaining of their pain, they were still reluctant to give up on their marathon exertion. Those crusaders from the fairy glade can appear behind me at any second. Down his feet stumbled, and it was a miracle that he did not trip over himself. Only after many berries did he pay attention to what lay in front of him, and Sancho was surprised when, down the path, through a gap in some arrowy white pines, many still in their youth, he looked out onto a pond. The tale of Sanchx and the Quiet Pond may sound familiar to you. No doubt all of you have found yourself resting after a sustained exertion, filling your lungs with fresh air, having discovered for yourself a majestic corner of these mortal fields, and thinking that there was something innately magical about that place. Not Sancho. He liked treasures that came in chests. Pilgrims come to such destinations for solace. They wander leagues, imagining that they can veil the emptiness in their spirits with landscapes, as if drinking from those waters will allow them to escape the endless busyness of their lives. Not this place. The quiet little pond speaks to us not because of its richness and beauty, but our poverty of spirit. Though it was a Wednesday, Sancho might have been taking a Sunday stroll after church along a country road. Harvest crocuses and black-eyed Susans were springing up along the small open field, pines and hickories at the water's edge. A large apple tree stood alone. It being the month of the tree, one of its heaviest branches, no more cautious than the berry bushes, offered its red fruit, ripe for Sancho's itchy hands. Several apples found their way into his pockets as he sauntered by, which he stored next to his cockade for safekeeping. 3 more large ones, outsizing his hobbling hands, could not but be chewed. Panic no longer forced his feeding, though he still hid his theft. It never crossed his mind that fruit might be given freely, that, in a state of nature, trees offered their fruit to spread their seed. Surely this orchard belongs to someone. Who knows what riches might be hidden here? For the moment, Sancho was satisfied with chewing. Their flesh tasted like bread from Yvain, their juice like the wine of Ishtar. His momentum slowed to a halt at another rock, this one long and half hidden in the sandy ground close to the water's edge. With a last effort, his body flopped down to sit, with his feet dangling off the front like a child at the harbor, throwing pebbles into the deep blue sea. The only thing that moved for a time was his jaw, an empty stomach gradually filling with fruit. His calculating eyes took the measure of water and wood. It was a shallow valley, the hills no more than gentle inclines. The evening was foggy near the quiet pond, which was longer than it was wide. While the sun began to set, the pond threw on its tattered clothing of mist like his own torn shirt. These tentacles of fog crept stealthily into the woods, as at the calling up of some nocturnal conventicle for the restless dead of legend. Here and there, soft ripples or a smooth surface were revealed by degrees. The stone bench lay so low to the water's edge that the opposite shore, half a mile off, like the rest of this sylvan world, blanketed with leaves and branches and boughs, was his most distant horizon. Its clean waters almost seemed to be made of greens, ochres, and browns, its surface a reflection of the wood around it, like mirrored glass. This quiet pond was a magical place, but made so neither by its beauty or serenity, which were both true enough, nor by some witch or fairy. It was enchanted by the needs that drove such seekers to it, as would hazard a wilder land to get there. It was not the supernatural magic of mana, but the natural magic of Ji that generated its power. This pilgrim found it without knowing that he was on a pilgrimage, this wanderer after having already endured too much of life. This fugitive was finally free, but he had reached a dead end. Another apple disappeared more leisurely. It gurgled on its way down. It was pleasant here in the late flower's sun, as the caves of his discontent were thawing, and the life that had lain torpid in the brambles of his spirit began to stretch itself awake. He chewed. Somewhere to his side, a stray loon splashed on the surface of the pond, either landing or taking off. It wailed like it spoke for the spirits. Ahoo! Sancho noticed something curious. For the first time in months, he was not scared. He did not worry about the haunted specters of legend or some sylvan hunters. Ahoo! He let the wild be. He caught the hawks circling around the clearing, pigeons perching by twos and threes on the boughs of white pines, and an osprey piercing the glossy surface of the pond for an unlucky fish, but not for a friendly conversation. Sancho had never been comfortable talking with animals. It felt like a witchy kind of magic. The osprey landed on a dead tree trunk where it had built its nest. The water raptor arranged the fish with its head facing up before picking it apart with its sharp beak. The smell of a fish dinner filled his imagination. Roasted on an open fire, its flesh light and tender to the tongue. Sancho was not ungrateful for the apples and berries. They just did not fill him up like roasted meat or hot, fresh bread. A fire seemed unwise, what with crusaders nearby, but the osprey was so fastidious a diner it seemed only proper to keep her company. So Sancho bit into another apple, while his eye traced the path of a striped snake sliding through the sand into the water. Some pressing snake business? Time here felt like the lazy stream on the far shore, blending into the deep eternity of the pond. Sancho was still rather thirsty, even after all that juice, but he had no desire to move his aching legs. A heaviness overcame him, weighing him down. So he just slipped forward along the path of the snake and dropped onto his hands and knees. Twice he crawled and placed his face at the water's surface, closed his eyes, and drank from it like an animal in the fields. The osprey and the snake took no notice. The water tasted as if filtered through moss. Only after drinking his fill, splashing his face several times and releasing some gas loudly from both ends, did he open his eyes again. He could see clearly through the water. He noticed how the sandy shore inclined into the shadows and how deep and dark the pond became in the middle, its stones like stars in the night sky. Sancho inhaled the crisp, fresh air and now began to smell the rich fragrance of flowers, trees, and grass. Ahoo! He sat up again on the vacant sandy shore. Every garden has its gardener, he thought cynically. His eyes caught a glimpse of strawberry in a patch of grass and then blackberries further into the forest. Black purple cherries popped up from behind the leaves of an adjacent bush. There is something of real value here. I can feel it. He took another drink from the crystal-clear pond, relishing the feeling of calm, this time using his hands to scoop the water. He washed his own blood from his arm, as well as the blood of Sanam the Crusader from his hands and knives. He spied the snake lying at the bottom of the pond, hiding out at the edge of darkness, apparently without inconvenience, perhaps because neither of them had yet truly come out of their torpid states. The grass in this little field practically invited him. Come, lay down, sleep. He began to imagine lingering here at the quiet pond, eating, drinking, maybe even roasting that fish, if he could just figure out how to catch one. Maybe the osprey knows where the treasure is hidden. I've never run a con on an animal before, but there's always a first time. Sancho sat back down on the rock. I was in quite the tight corner back there in the thorn bushes, but I escaped. He could hardly believe his good fortune. Ahoo! His hunger was stilled, his thirst quenched. He began to feel the depths of his exhaustion. Was I dreaming the whole thing? He imagined curling up with that snake at the bottom of the pond and taking a long nap. This is a perfect hideout, he said out loud to no one. I concur. He sat back up with a start. A ferret perched calmly on the boulder next to him. To a hobbling, a ferret was the size of a dog. It could have rabies, or worse. Adrenaline rushing, Sancho backed away from the little beast. With its tail resting off the back of the rock, the ferret sat leisurely on its hind legs, causing its back to arch in that way peculiar to members of the weasel family. Just as well, for there was no fight left in Sancho. The more he thought about it, the more he figured that a ferret was probably more interested in eating moles or mice than hobblings. So Sancho put away the crusader daggers that had found their way into his hands and greeted his new acquaintance. Proszę, zapraszam pana. The young hobbling was still wearing Pridbor's fancy silks, though there were tears in the shirt and runs in the trousers. My apologies, sir, he continued in the common tongue, but with Pridbor's Wilkie accent. I didn't notice you there. Am I intruding? The ferret dismissed the error with a wave of its paw. Not in the least. You seem rather preoccupied. Its fur was mostly black, with some hints of brown in his undercoat, but its front paws and neck were white, like an aristocrat in gloves and a tie. And anyway, I wanted to find out first if you were sheep or wolf. Or a wolf in sheep's clothing, Pridbor replied. Or that. And which am I? You tell me. They conversed the way they dressed, like courtiers at a fete, and the shells were spinning faster than waltzing dancers. Pridbor considered, in passing, whether he could catch a ferret with his bare hands, but he decided that an old ferret would probably be too gamey for his urban palate. Still, the little weasel might have some information, like who owns this pond and where they've hidden their treasure. Once again, I am referring to the protagonist of this tale as Pridbor, because he was Pridbor at the moment. He showed off his left shoulder, a horned bull superimposed on a wavy river. It was G-magic that allowed Sancho to so fully become his roles, and he was too committed to the scam for half measures. Each person has certain things that define us as who we are. Titles, knickknacks, habits even. Pridbor was rather attached to his. So Sancho tried to wear them like they were really his own, not some costume. But sometimes the props smothered him, made him feel empty, like there was nothing essentially Sancho underneath. Well, Pridbor reassured his new acquaintance, I doubt that a wolf would sit here quietly in the sun eating apples, and I have no idea how to skin a sheep. Have you no parchmenters in your village? Who makes leaves for your books? It was a strange sort of question coming from a ferret in the wilder land. Pridbor boasted, Vilkeland is renowned for its libraries and its scholars. Many two-legged creatures fritter away their lives at some kind of busyness. I wish I were, Pridbor replied sincerely. Back in business, that is. He was thinking of a criminal enterprise, but he did not say as much. You can see the power of G at work. It resides not only in living things, but emerges through their interactions. The charismatic warlords and warlocks of the Fifth Age discovered how to channel its power. They used G to accomplish seemingly impossible feats by doing it together. Over the centuries since, philosophers have used similar spells to pry open the secrets of the Pantheon through dialogue. Teachers to break pupils of their old ways, con men to rob their targets of their valuables. The spell was called Höflichkeit among the nobility of Nej. It was a kind of magical duel disguised as polite conversation. I have tried to reconstruct this one for you from what Sancho could remember. The old ferret advanced the first proposition. Occupations are quicksand. They suck you down with 14,000 matters that must be addressed. But animals are just as preoccupied by their labors, the young man countered. You can find eager beavers and busy bees in every corner of the Pantheon. Don't try to get the attention of chipmunks if they are preparing for the season of caves. Truth to that, I may have 20 toes. The small animal wiggled his. But an honest ferret really needs only have 2 or 3 matters that require their attention on a morning such as this. The ferret pointed to the quiet pond, which was looking rather pleasant indeed. Pridbor explored the ferret's eyes instead. What's he hiding? These were as dark as the impenetrable night. Should be easy enough to figure out. He's a chatty little beast. What about food? The young aristocrat pointed to the boughs that hung heavy on the nearby bush. You wouldn't happen to know if those cherries are poisonous? Just sour. That's what the bears say. Please, help yourself. Pridbor bowed and said, Bardzo zobowiązana, meaning much obliged. He walked over to the cherries, putting his back to the ferret as a sign of trust. I hunt when I'm hungry, the ferret said, but I won't allow it to be my purpose in life. A grey Landiga joins me here for a drink on some mornings like this. All truly important things happen in such mornings. We can have a pleasant chat if she's already eaten her fill, but you have to take care. She's still a wolf. Pridbor smiled while freeing a cherry from its stone with his mouth. Wilki, pronounced Vilki, means wolf, so Pridbor could hardly be insulted for being so called. Permit me to introduce myself, so you will have no doubts in that regard. He threw the stone into the bush and bowed. "I am Pridbor, son of the Pan of Sene." "If you say so," the ferret replied. "You can call me Purahan." "Then, Purahan, please accept my apologies for my dreadful appearance. The wood is vast. I've been lost in it for many days, and my sincere thanks for sharing the fruits of your garden. Nothing here is mine. What of these trees and bushes? Not even a burrow? The one that bears my name belongs to my wife, since she's happiest in it." "Then why come here?" "Peace, quiet, solitude." Pridbor laughed with a hint of polite mockery. "A vacation from your busy life?" "I refuse to be more busy than necessary." "A ferret of leisure, no estate to manage?" Pridbor casually collected a few more cherries and strolled back to the other side of the rock. "Ishtar forbid it." The con artist was not convinced. He imagined a chest of jewels hidden at the bottom of the pond. Why else stand watch here in the middle of nowhere? "Then what do you do with your time?" "Now that's a much better question to ask," Purahan answered. "On such a morning as this," Pridbor added. Purahan smiled. "I use my time to think and to dream." "Impossible dreams?" Pridbor interrupted. "That reminds me of a tale." "I love a good story on a morning such as this." Pridbor bowed to Purahan and began to recite. There once was a gentleman from the lands of Vilk. He read too many stories of epic fantasy, which unbalanced his mind. He longed to wield a star sword instead of a wine glass, to travel all 5 lands and all 7 seas of the Pantheon, to perform heroic deeds for others. In other words, he was a fool. "Why a fool?" Purahan asked. "He imagined the world as he wanted it to be," Pridbor explained, "instead of how it was." "Don't we all?" "He pretended to be a hero." "Stories are dangerous enchantments," Purahan acknowledged. "He was mad," Pridbor insisted. "He believed he would be a knight if only he had a squire. So he asked Sancho, a simple farmer from his village, if the poor fellow would accompany him on noble quests. As a reward, he promised to make Sancho into a king of his own island." "And to earn such a reward, what did this Sancho have to do?" "Speak the truth." Purahan smiled. "So the peasant was a philosopher." "Ah, that's the rub," Pridbor countered. "Sancho had no choice but to lie, and to lie all the time, for the fool was a knight only in his dreams." "Quite the paradox." "And the more that this sorry knight imagined perils that required heroism, the more he placed himself, his poor squire, and all the people around them in terrible danger. What in these mortal fields did poor Sancho do? Why, the squire was forced to chase after the nobleman, from crisis to crisis, in the hopes of securing his fortune." "It seems he had no choice," Purahan proposed. Pridbor laughed. "The squire had to make this fake knight believe that he was a real knight to keep them all from harm, himself included." "You mean to suggest," Purahan asked, "that this Sancho was a kind of confidence man?" "Only for the sake of others." "Running a kingdom sounds to me like quite a busyness." "That's the problem with impossible dreams," Pridbor replied. "They never come true." Purahan let the story settle, then spoke. "Here in the vast wood we tell that tale rather differently. We call it Sancho and the Ingenious Knight." "Ingenious?" "We think the knight espoused a certain wisdom buried under all his madness." "How so?" "The knight did wrap himself in the fabric of his own fabrications, but Sancho came to believe in the value of fantasy, of impossible dreams. In the end, he joined the knight on his quests gladly." Pridbor was not interested in fables. What, pray, could a ferret dream of? Not for a kingdom. Moles and mice, then, isn't that your instinct? My spirit tells me that it's an organ for burrowing, as most use their snout and forepaws. Poor Hans sat up on his haunches and flexed his fingers and claws as if to demonstrate their talents. I would burrow my way through these hills if I could. Why, these hills? I see only wilderland. I do believe that the richest vein is here, so here is where I've decided to mine. Another burrow? Pridbor looked around discreetly. So you have one here too? Poor Hans pointed with his claw at a patch of sumac and blackberry. A woodchuck dug it down to the roots. Is that where you mine? Is this rich vein only a dream, or have you already struck it? I dream in this one. It's not mine. Pridbor was confused. It's dry, Poor Hans continued. It's cozy. It has an even temperature day and night, and the sand's well packed, so it keeps its place. You're welcome to rest in it, if you please. A little person like yourself would be quite comfortable there. Pridbor was incensed. I sleep in a luxurious bed, not in some paltry underground burrow. Here in the wood? Obviously not. In my castle. Your castles must have cellars to store food. Yes, they're cool and dry. So the largest castle is a little more than a front porch for your true burrow, as this rock is for mine. Wait, all you do in this burrow is sleep and dream. We all need a sanctuary for dreaming. I have this quiet pond. Sancho laid his hand casually on his pocket to confirm. This ferret had not somehow gotten its paws on his treasure, but the fear of losing the cocaine broke his concentration. I know better than most what it means to give up on your fantasies, what it costs to lose hope. Our dreams have a way of distracting us from the business of living, so we lock the most precious ones in a vault for safekeeping and forget where we put the key. It's on those rare occasions when we unlock the vaults to our souls, when we remember that there might have been another way, that we slam the door shut again with the voice of necessity. I had no choice, we say to our dreams when we abandon them. We tell them to mind their own busyness, so we can go back to minding ours. But the door to the vault can be slammed shut just so many times before it begins to crack. Sancho had heard the rumors that Jolly Rogers had buried a vast treasure on a remote island in the Pathalassic Ocean. But did he really believe that an old ferret had dug a gold mine in the wilderland? Maybe Sancho was exhausted from the strain of months on the run. Maybe he was dreaming it all. Or maybe poor Hans was using some G-magic of his own. Maybe he was burrowing in Pridbor's soul in search of what was truly valuable. There's nothing more precious to me than a good nap in the afternoon. A nap? Sancho was getting frustrated with this conversation. You and I are like cowbirds and cuckoos. We lay our eggs in nests that others have built. One moment, sir. I would never steal someone else's home. Sancho worried that he had been found out somehow. Poor Hans laughed. People like you don't build their own. People like me? What's that supposed to mean? Don't you have servants for that? I do have servants, Sancho replied, trying to assume the role of Pridbor again. I am the son of a gentleman. The young man gestured at the bough of a tall tree, the way the real Pridbor had done when they had walked together along Shark Bay in the rain. Vilky aristocrats took pride in their romantic hearts. So Pridbor struck a pose, legs parted, arms extended, and expressed his lyrical soul in poetry. And truly might I be distressed to see such bird in such a nest, for he was as beautiful as day, and in his natural spirit gay. Very pretty, the old ferret clapped, But you misunderstand me. I admire those who are above such triflings as building houses. I have no desire for a burrow or a nest, because I have no desire to fill it with all sorts of useful or shiny things. Purahan's statement felt to Sancho like a personal attack, like the ferret had somehow seen into his soul and guessed that Sancho wanted to rob him blind. How is wanting things a crime? I prefer those who would do each day as we do this morning, Purahan continued. Sit here on this quiet pond and watch our friend the osprey eat his fish. As if on cue, the raptor pushed the bones of the gutted fish into the water and lifted off to circle the pond. You deny the value of honest work. Animals abandon their nests when they are done with them. Others may take them. Next you'll say we should give away our gold, too. Baubles, they have no eternal value. Castles are rather permanent, Pridbor imagined. Purahan stretched his back in pause, and then crossed the rock to where the young hobbling stood. The larger the castle, the more work it requires. A castle needs a barracks, the barracks an armory, the armory a mine. So you do want a mine. I wouldn't want to dig it. That's what servants are for. Standing erect on his hind paws, the old ferret began poking at Pridbor's torn silk shirt. I have seen your castles. You build monuments to kings and aristocrats. Your servants clean your chambers. Serfs tend your herds. Slaves plant your fields. Untouchables muck out your barns, for which they are fed and housed. Do you expect me to build a monument to a coyote? What of the horses who pull your carriages, and the oxen who pull your plows? Do you ever erect monuments to them? You're one of those heathens. You believe in rights for animals. I don't have to believe in my rights, the ferret replied, for them to exist. You support that rebel, the Animancipator. Even Sancho had heard the rumors of the bandit who liberated beasts from their masters. Only by admiring his courage, he chose a heroic path in life, and he dared pursue it. That's a virtue on this or any morning. Sancho stepped up on a small rock in lieu of a soapbox, resumed his role of Pridbor in spite of the holes in his costume, and preached like a clergyman. The Animancipator is a thief and a heretic. He steals private property and undermines the restoration of order. Now we come to it. The great ladder of being, Purahan said sarcastically. Each to their own rung, Pridbor insisted, whether species, caste, or gender. That's what fences are for. I need no fences, for I own no cattle. Of course you don't. Pridbor placed his arms on his hips. You're a beast yourself. Better that each is free to live as they will. Pridbor shook his head. Might as well tilt at windmills. And who will build those, your slaves or your beasts? Purahan, the beast philosopher. At least I don't pretend to be what I'm not. Pridbor wavered. What's that supposed to mean? It means that I led an ordinary sort of ferret life for many years, but I was too curious. About what? I traveled through all the lands of Ward. A foolish night after all. I hunted my treasure relentlessly. Did you find it? I did. The more I observed the bizarre ways of other creatures, the more I felt compelled to admit the strangeness of my own. Hunting, fishing, burrowing, all the normal tasks of a proper ferret seemed to lose their value. And you buried your treasure right here, Pridbor insisted, on this quiet pond. Indeed. Was it gold? Platinum? Better. An end to busyness. Sancho turned away, frustrated. Do you ever notice the way we burden ourselves with tasks? Purahan continued. A woman buys a cow for its milk, so she must feed and milk the cow every day. Who now is the master, and who the slave? Sancho looked at the quiet pond. You twist everything around till it makes no sense. Herders are not so much the keepers of animals as animals are the keepers of you. Too much busyness, too little freedom. Sancho certainly preferred his own freedom over the cell that awaited him, or the gallows. Gold, land, titles. We become slaves to the things we want. Your foolish knight needed a squire. Even the wise squire needed a kingdom to make him into a king. None of this made any sense to Sancho. He was not Pridbor, not really, and that foolish boy threw it all away for the sake of living truthfully. Sancho longed for an island of his own, or to live in the Cockaigne and eat as much cheese pastry as he could. All of these wantings accumulated in the mirror of the quiet pond. Porohan pressed his point relentlessly. You have the chance to live simply. You don't need things to define who you are. You would only waste your life protecting what you fear to lose. Sancho longed to worry about losing things that actually belonged to him. He filled the emptiness of his life with a mountain of wants. Thieves need their avarice, liars their deceptions. Sancho placed his hands over his ears. Do you ever stop talking? But everywhere Sancho tried to hide, the ferret found him. The poor get attached to their poverty, the slaves their chains. Gazing into the looking glass, Sancho could see that hobbling again, pimped, sold, chained, whipped, and worse. Why do slaves dream of becoming masters? Porohan inquired, rather than a world without either. A world without? You have no idea what you're talking about. Sancho yelled at the quiet pond. No one gave me anything. Everything I've ever had in these mortal fields, I've had to take. Porohan stepped off the rock. Which did you treasure the most? Sancho's hand protected the cockaigne. Nothing. That's just the point. I have nothing. Wrong. You are rich with wants. Sancho shook his head and turned away. He wrapped his vulnerable body in his own arms to protect it from Porohan's attacks. And you have your self-deceptions. You sacrifice yourself on their altar all the time. Sacrifice? Sancho retreated back to the rock, making sure to avoid the ferret as he did. I deny myself nothing. But the hunt was over. Porohan moved in for the kill. That's why you build your cathedrals of stone. You need a crypt for your dreams, so the restless dead will stay buried underground, so the wraiths won't demand that you remember. Remember what? How once you had been free. Sancho felt cornered, like it was the ferret who had chased him for leagues through the vast wood, who tracked him mercilessly down into the burrow of his soul, where there was no way to escape his piercing black eyes. I'm no knight. I'm no hero. And you are not Pridbor. Sancho's eyes began to water of their own accord. He tightened his arms around his own chest, as if to hold his seething emotions in check. But I won't ever be a slave again. Never. No, just a slave to your own wants. The anger burst out of Sancho like blood from Sanam's jugular. You don't know who I am. You don't know anything about me. Porohan took a step back, uncertain. You can say such stupid things only because you've never been a slave, you dumb beast. Sancho's voice echoed over the water, causing ripples on the quiet pond. A league away, on the far side of the boulder that guarded the path that led down to the quiet pond, 5 wounded crusaders were making their way through the wilderland, hunting a murderer. Did you hear that? Bootmouth whispered. They all stopped to listen. On the quiet pond, Sancho continued to accuse his accuser. You've never known poverty. You've never been so hungry that it felt like your stomach would eat itself if it could. Sancho felt like the ferret was looking straight through his ragged clothing at the ugly body underneath. You're right. I have all the things I need right here. Ample food, a warm shelter, a thick fur coat, and my freedom. Congratulations. Even if I had nothing, though, I would not try to fill the void in my spirit with a mine full of gold or a warren full of moles. Such trifles are only obstacles to living. The Crusaders began to walk backwards, retracing their steps, trying to listen for the voice they thought they'd heard, echoing across the vast wood. Well, not me. Sancho tried to wear the mantle of Pridbor again. I like living comfortably. I enjoy the good life. He found himself inventing false memories of plush bedrooms and large fireplaces and cellars overstocked with juices and wines and beers. Shams and delusions, but by all means get busy, build your castles and your windmills. The youngest of the Crusaders stopped. Jaweh noticed a piece of fabric stuck to one of the thorn bushes next to a boulder. He could see clearly. It did not belong here in the midst of the vast wood. It was made of fine silk, and it had fresh blood in its fibers. You imagine that a simple life is a lie, like some kind of fairy tale, as remote as the farthest star. Jaweh waved for his comrades to come over. They moved as silent as the dead. My father is the master of vast fields and rich mines, Sancho pretended. What young man would give up his inheritance? I laughed out loud when Sancho told me this part of the tale. I imagined this con artist, lost in the wild, clothed in the torn remnants of fine silks, defending a status that Pridbor had forsworn and Sancho had never possessed. But by that time, Sancho was no longer in a laughing mood. And why not? Purahan asked. To be free. Free to starve? The fugitive's stomach growled again. This time he knew that fruit would not satisfy him. Sancho wondered now in earnest what roasted ferret might taste like. Jaweh showed the tatter of silk to his sergeant. Zhang put a finger to his mouth and then waved 2 times crisply with his left hand in the direction of the quiet pond. They began to search quietly for a path through the overgrowth. It's all a front, Sancho calculated. This weasel's distracting me. He's hiding something big. Sancho's hand slipped onto his dagger. I have no choice. Fukuju pointed towards the narrow trail along the side of the boulder. The commander motioned to them to crawl through the brambles. They proceeded as quietly as possible. They had a murderer to catch. I'm not here to judge, Purahan insisted. The greater part of what society calls good behavior, I believe in my soul to be bad. And if I repent of anything, it's my good behavior. So, you're a thief, Sancho whispered. Purahan spoke gently. I'm sorry if you've suffered so. I'm sorry, too, that obstacles still stand in your way. What I have learned is to not make myself into my own obstacle. Enough talk. Sancho laid his cards on the table. What exactly is your game? Precisely. We should all live in these mortal fields as if it were nothing more than a game. Sancho stared down those unintelligible black eyes in warning. I'm not playing. It took a moment for the Crusaders to pass through the thicket. Sergeant Zhang motioned for them to be silent, and they moved cautiously down the alleyway. Think of life like a pair of gloves, Purahan suggested. You can use them to build a house, or to stay warm in caves, or even to perform some magic. The trick is to try on as many different pairs as you can till one pair feels right. I do like gloves, Sancho admitted to himself. But out loud he said, You just want me to live as you do. Never. Purahan jumped up on his side of the rock. No 2 leaves on the living tree are ever the same. No, son. I want you to live as you. A slap on the face wouldn't have shocked him as much. Live as you? Sancho could no longer look at Purahan, face his piercing black eyes. How could he know? How could a ferret possibly know? Quiet descended on the quiet pond. Past blueberry bushes, Jang peeked around the corner. In the distance, he could see two small shapes, motionless against the silhouette of the quiet pond. A murderer and a beast. Dig into those hills in your spirit, the ferret urged in Sancho's ear and almost pushed his shoulder to get him to look. With gloves or paws or hands, mine for who you really are. Sancho knelt before the quiet pond. He felt as naked as the snake, visible at the bottom of the dark, still waters, trapped by this crazy ferret like a mole at the end of a warren. Jang gestured for two officers to move down the clearing on one side and two on the other. Each stepped carefully, making no sound as they approached their targets. The skin on Sancho's neck began to crawl. All this chatter, he's stalling for time. Do you talk to your young this way, or only to strangers? Not most, Purahan laughed. My daughter listens, but you came here seeking something. Not a lecture in philosophy. Purahan laughed again. Well, if you were my prudence, I would say this. Each one of us should be careful to live in our own way, not their fathers or mothers or neighbors instead. That's the true hero's quest. Now the Crusaders could overhear their conversation. Quintin and Jawei stood on Purahan's side, Fukuju and Butnath on Pridvor's. The sergeant stepped past the apple tree with his hand poised and ready to strike. Both the wise sailor and the fugitive slave are travelers. Purahan pointed into the distant sky above the still pond. They both keep the pole star in their eye. Jang chopped the air with his hand like an executioner's axe. Bind! Quintin's curse echoed across the quiet pond, sending birds into flight. Invoking the power of justice, a mass of sticky thread hurled towards Purahan, striking him from behind. Fukuju added, Punish! From the other side. In the name of the Red Queen, punish! A fire seared through his neck. Sancho grasped at his throat, but he felt only his own skin. The ferret struggled to free himself from a thick tangle of thread that caught his entire hindquarters. Run! Purahan barked. Save yourself! Bind! Quintin called out again, this time from closer to the pond, and the blow from the wand knocked the ferret backwards off the rock. The sticky cords had a life of their own. They wove their way around the ferret's body until Purahan lay at the water's edge, enveloped in a cocoon. Only his snout and front paws were sticking out. Punish! Fukuju repeated the curse a second time with venom, another wave of pain. Sancho could not breathe. A warm, sticky liquid was seeping down into his lungs. He tried to wipe it away with his hands, but there was nothing there. He tripped over himself and fell to the ground. The hunt was over. Their prey captured, the Crusaders relaxed. Look, Quintin strolled up to their two captives. I've caught some butterflies in my web. Fukuju gloated over Sancho. Now do you feel what it's like? The red wand of punishment was in her hand. That's how Sanam felt when you slit her throat. Sancho held his neck, but there was no trace of blood on his hands or in the grass. He twisted around on the ground, struggling to free himself from a torture that he could not grasp. Sancho was suffocating. Well done, Jawei. Jang sauntered down the field. He had several apples in his hand and distributed them before taking a bite himself. Butnath snatched up an apple and bit into it. A merry chase you led us on, little murderer, but we caught you. Now the fun begins. Sancho was coughing violently. To rid his chest of the blood that was not there, and writhing in pain from a wound he did not have. His eyes began to bulge. Dukar! Butnath kicked the pig for good measure. Pain shot through Sancho's ribs. I think he's had enough. Jawei put his hand on Butnath to stop him. He's turning blue. This is for Sanam. Fukuju gave Sancho a kick as well. "And this is for me." She raised her fist to strike him in the face. Sancho had enough of his wits about him to roll out of the way, but only into Quentin's feet, which caused him to groan again from the bruises in his ribs. "Not this time, murderer. You won't get away from us again." Jiawei looked to Zhang for help. "Sir, regulations." But Zhang did not ask Fukuju to dispel her curse. This sergeant of the Tieren seemed in no hurry to relieve Sancho of his suffering. "Take them both in hand." As you may have guessed, Sancho was feeling the mortal agony of his victim, Sanam, at the moment of her death. But where Sancho had eased her quickly, mercifully, into the river of lost souls, the river that must one day carry all of us to the spirit realm, Sancho kept experiencing death again and again, like an eternal torment. Like a murderer. Quentin picked up the ferret and carried him under his arms, like a game ball. "Ti ho preso." "And I've got you." Bootmouth leaned over to grab the hobbling. In spite of his desperation to breathe, Sancho struggled so much that the Diabolus had to grapple with him. Even in his agonizing punishment, Sancho's entire being resisted the grasp of this half-man, half-devil. "Don't touch me! You can't touch me!" Sancho wrapped his arms tightly around his chest to protect his tender, beaten body from the hands of this monster. But Bootmouth was larger and stronger. He engulfed the hobbling from behind with his arms. Only then did Zhang say, "Enough!" Fukuju released the curse. Sancho swallowed all the air he could with a loud gulp. Without knowing it, he relaxed his body for just a split second. Like a wrestler, Bootmouth's powerful arms wound around Sancho to hold him even more tightly. By chance, one slipped through a hole in Sancho's shirt. His red, leathery hands landed on two delicate hills of flesh. "Here now? What's this?" The memory of pain still seared Sancho's throat as she began to shake with fear. "No, you can't!" she screamed. She wailed. She thrashed. "Get your hands off me! I won't let you!" In spite of the pain, she tried desperately to free herself from his lascivious grasp. The Diabolus roared with laughter. "This one's more of a monster than we thought." He gave her tiny young breasts another squeeze. "We'll have some fun later," Bootmouth whispered in Sancho's ear. "Won't we, Poragi?" "We'll have fun with you both," Quentin said to the ferret. "Enough games," the sergeant ordered. "Get them back to the outpost. Their fates are in the hands of justice now." Thank you for listening to this podcast. Look for the next episode, Bastion and the Crusader Outpost, and the novel Detention, Book 1 of the Tales of the Fastbreakers. You can visit thepatheon.com for free maps, glossaries, and more. Or support this project at ko-fi.com/thepatheon for access to Discord, hard copies, role-playing adventures, and more. Music created by Gerbob for the Patheon LLC. The Patheon and the Tales of the Fastbreakers are registered trademarks of the Patheon LLC. No part of this story or audio recording may be reproduced or transmitted on any medium for any reason without permission of the Patheon LLC. Sanchx and the Quiet Pond, What Came Out, May 2025, copyright 2025, the Patheon LLC, all rights reserved.